Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Brett Gelfand, Managing Partner of Cannabiz Collects. Thank you very much for joining me today, Brett.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Well, before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Brett, I always like to start with a little bit of background, and I apologize if I'm rusty because it's been a week or two since I shot one of these. But how did you get involved with the cannabis industry?
Sure. It was a wild ride from the beginning. It was actually my first job out of college. I went to University of Georgia with a finance degree, and I was always entrepreneurial. I was trying to find some way out of working corporate. I had kind of a job set up to do financial consulting, and I definitely didn't want to go that direction, on the corporate side. I got a call from kind of a family friend back in 2015. Hey, Brett, I'm starting a cannabis company outside of Aspen, Colorado. You want to come help me build this up from the ground up? And I thought, hell yeah, let's do it. So it was pretty epic. I went out there, hired as kind of the first employee, the executive assistant. And long story short, we raised close to $20 million. We blew out 3 facilities with extract, 45,000 square foot grow. We had 2 dispensaries. We hired 60 people. And right when the company was going to launch, my boss unfortunately got sick. He had to leave the state of Colorado, and the investment board that I basically worked along with, for the last year or so was like, well, looks like you're going to be CEO of the company. So my first real big opportunity, I stepped into and, was there for a few years. And that's where I saw different needs and issues in Colorado that I foresee happening through the rest of the country shortly thereafter.
So what was it like? How far is the cannabis industry from, as you would describe, like the corporate side?
Like how different is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's, instead of me having to have a badge to get in and out of the office in corporate and have these kind of like team culture building meetings, I was with a master extractor, a master grower, my investor, and my partner and boss outside on a balcony smoking different flavored vapes to figure out which ones we wanted to roll into in the new product launch. So I think there's a very different playing field. It's changing every day. It was way different in 2015 than it is today. And if you go to any of the trade shows, especially MJ Biz, you can see the difference in maturity that it is now than it was before. But big picture speaking, the idea of policies, procedures, different departments with controls in place. I was traveling with $50,000 of cash in my 4Runner and 4 pounds of weed because, we couldn't have a bank account back then. And, we had issues where now things are changing. There's a little bit more accessibility to banks. But yeah, overall, the personalities and the maturity of the industry is still not caught up with traditional industry. And that plays a lot into what we're trying to work into today on the credit and collection side.
So what was the name of that previous company, and are you still involved at all?
No, I left. The acronym was CPS. It was right outside of Aspen. I think they had some management issues, following my resignation to start my own companies. But they had a couple prominent brands out there in Colorado, like Double Black Extracts and Mountain Flower. There's we built some pretty great brands, and we had really good product, and we had amazing facilities. I mean, completely from the ground up, all new equipment, all state of the art, everything. And I think in business, the reason that most companies fail is just because of the top ownership, communication. And it's sad because a lot of great products go to fail. A lot of great companies go to fail just because, unfortunately, sometimes the partners, the managers, the investors just can't really get along, like in any partnership or relationship in general in life. So yeah, I'm not sure where they're at today, but I left in 2017, so it's been a minute.
So when you left in 2017, at what point did you realize you wanted to step out on your own and start your own shop?
It was actually while I was still out there. Kind of two things happened almost in tandem. One was, we were developing new products out in Colorado to try to compete with some of the big, Denver, Boulder grows, the native roots of the world, the live wells of the world, and like, how can we be competitive? And one thing that I saw out there was like the pre-roll market was very limited, just selling single tubes. It was kind of a way to test yourself into buying an eighth or buying an ounce. And it kind of hit me one day, I was thinking, why don't they sell packs of joints? Why is it always singles? And the big reason was that there wasn't packaging. There wasn't child resistant compliant packaging that could hold more than one pre-roll at a time back then. So my first light bulb went off and I thought, damn, I got to create a child resistant container that holds more than one joint. That company I started later, in around 2017, about the same time that I left. But while I was working at the company, my gear started turning around this idea as I was running the business in Colorado. So that was my first big idea, was we have to, build a packaging business that focused on pre-rolls and start creating this whole new SKU, because I foresaw pre-rolls being more than just a one and done, doob tube, and more of a mainstay SKU, as we can all see, especially with what you guys do with equipment and machinery. There's a ton of robotics companies that are doing automatic pre-roll machines. So that was number one of, okay, I'm going to start my own business and go off on my own and do this and do manufacturing and overseas and the whole shebang. But because I was leaving a pretty cushy position as CEO in this Colorado cannabis company, I thought, well, what can I get going right away to help not only support income, but fix another need? And the next day I went to the office in Colorado, and my big task of the day was trying to get retailers to pay us, because we were one of the first ones to extend credit terms in the industry. We were trying to be competitive, like I said, to some of the more metro area grows and producers. So one of the ways to do that was, why don't we go ahead and extend net 15, net 30 to some of our customers that have been with us for a while? And we rolled out this new credit program. Our sales went through the roof. It was super exciting. Our sales reps were amped. And then 90 days later, we didn't have any cash coming back, to home. So I was responsible, to try to make sure that I could pay the bills to everybody. And I had to get on the phone making collection calls. And then another light bulb went off. And my dad was a commercial collection attorney for over 30 years. He ran one of the largest collection agencies in the Southeast out of Atlanta, representing Honda Capital One. And I thought, I'm not going to have time to handle all this debt to try to collect. I'm also looking at leaving this company and going off on my own and starting this packaging business. What a great opportunity to bring my dad back out of retirement after he sold his law firm and collection agency and start the nation's first cannabis collection agency. And that was in 2017 as well. So those kind of came together around the same time. And here I am.
That is a wild 2017. What does net 15, net 30 mean?
Yeah, so those are credit terms. So when you give somebody 15 days to pay, you'd call that net 15. If you give somebody net 30, that's 30 days to pay you back. In cannabis, it might sound more like, yeah, bro, like I'll pay you in 10 days. I'll pay you back in 20 days, my man. That's kind of the evolution of what happened, is people were extending credit without paper trails, without contracts, kind of maybe doing it how it was done before legalization. And as we're seeing more and more now, and as the topic is buzzing out of control today, with everybody being owed money, the big issue was just that we have to step up and understand that when you are giving somebody net 15, net 30, if you're giving somebody product without getting paid on delivery, you're giving a free loan. You're acting as a bank. You're acting just like Wells Fargo or Chase, giving a free loan, but with no paper trail, with no collateral, with no signatures. And what bank in the world would do that? Right. None. So you shouldn't either. And I think that was the big kind of wake up call for me, knowing how hard it was to collect money as I was operating the cannabis company. But the minute I started this collection agency, we actually took on the debt from the company I used to work for. They were our client after I left, and we took on all that paper and we collected like 75% of it. And people say, well, what can a collection agency do different than, our own accounts receivable team? And that's, a topic that we can get into if we need to. But the whole point is there needs to be even an idea that you can escalate an account to collections. that is an option in cannabis today. You know, you don't just have to try to sue. And if you do sue, it's not always a good idea to spend a bunch of money on lawyers and try to acquire a judgment without any, you know, actual guarantee that you're going to get paid, where you could be throwing a lot of good money after bad. All these things, you know, are maybe not the sexiest topic, right? But they're probably one of the biggest issues today of why cannabis companies are going out of business. And it maybe strangely fuels me to help educate people on this topic, because it's not fair for the good actors to go out of business when they could just make a couple, you know, tweaks to their operations and their controls to ensure that they have proper cash flow to pay for their expenses and stay competing in this game.
And we definitely will get into that. First, I'm curious. So like you said, you had a pretty cushy role as CEO. And then in 2017, you essentially changed gears as the head of two kind of very different types of companies. What was that like, making that transition and you kind of making sure that both succeeded?
Yeah, it was a little bit scary. I mean, I would say it was scary to leave. I liked the cannabis industry in Colorado. I was starting to make a little bit of a name for myself. I was still young, so I was, you know, doing my best. It's always kind of a weird situation where you have a lot of people working, you know, maybe for you that are a lot older than you. And I was still trying to find myself as a leader, as someone new to the industry in Colorado. And I was enjoying it, really kind of, you know, up for the challenge. But I didn't have equity in that company. It wasn't my business. And ever since I was little, I always wanted to, you know, I've always ran my own businesses and I've always wanted to be entrepreneurial in my own endeavors. And I didn't want to, you know, essentially have a boss for the rest of my life. So it was scary, but exciting. And I think the two different ideas I had enough legs because I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to have had that experience in Colorado, where I had direct feedback from the people I worked with, from clients, where I felt good enough that I was on a track to make them successful. And it was funny, you know, the first couple conventions I went to, I had one booth to try to save money and I was pitching pre-roll packaging. So, hey, do you sell pre-rolls? And someone will be like, nah, I don't sell pre-rolls. Oh, well, are you owed money? You know, just hustling to try to figure out, you know, which angle I could help them with. But at the same time, I was, you know, first year getting going, and trying to cross-sell those things was a challenge. But thankfully, now, you know, we've been able to set up, you know, the businesses in a really nice, professional, steady fashion that is just set up for scale. So it took a while, but it was a fun ride.
What is the packaging company?
So the packaging company was called Packcase. I actually sold that business last year. It was in 2022. I sold the business, which was like I mentioned, the first child-resistant multi-pack for pre-rolls. You know, we landed our first deal with Canopy Growth Corporation and got an exclusive in Canada to work with Leaf Spy Snoop and Seth Rogen's House Plant, and these amazing brands that it was just perfect timing. 2018, having a child-resistant pre-roll packaging option that it wasn't, you know, Health Canada didn't have any other options other than a single doob tube. So it was just perfect timing for us to be into the market with a new SKU, with a new packaging option. And we built up that business for about 5 years. And I thought that I wanted to spend most of my time focusing on the collection space and dedicating 100% of my energy, because I feel like now more than ever, people need help collecting money, making better credit decisions in place of paying for more premium packaging options and having higher end packaging. That's a much harder sell today than it was, you know, a couple of years ago. So I kind of did my best to take my chips off the table there and focus my time and energy on what I think even fuels me a little bit more. It's really trying to help, you know, good operators make good decisions.
Why does it fuel you more?
So I've been there, you know, I've been there. I think everyone that I've talked to has been owed money, either in a personal capacity or a business capacity. And it's strange because my dad was a commercial collection attorney, like I said, for basically my entire childhood, and always wanted me to take over his business. And the last thing in the world I would ever do is take over a collection agency for my dad. Like, that was not an option. I do not want to be a debt collector. I don't want to run a debt collection agency. But then after my experience in Colorado and meeting a lot of industry friends and contacts, I realized how big of an issue this is, specifically in cannabis, and how there was an opportunity for me to kind of change the narrative of collections and this might be a little tacky, but like I really wanted to make collections hip, cool, different, unique, sexy in a way. And the way to do that, I thought, was, well, let's really serve an industry that desperately needs it, and let's market to an industry that desperately needs it, and let's do it better than any other, standard collection agency. Like, my dad's friends were back in the day, the older folks that have been doing this for, 50, 60 years. I wanted to kind of really find a way to change the narrative of what it means to escalate your accounts to collecting debt, and how that, when we collect money for our clients, especially some more of the mom and pop clients that we work with, some of the local growers, many times we're literally saving their business. And, it can sound altruistic, but I mean, that's the feeling that I get sometimes, because we only get paid if our clients get paid, right? So we lose if you lose. And we're not going to be, like a standard law firm that's going to charge you a ridiculous retainer and $700 an hour to go chase a debtor, and with no guarantee to get paid, which could just put you at a worse position. You're already owed money already. What's worse than spending, thousands of dollars on legal fees without any guarantee that you're going to see a recovery at the end of the day? For us, working solely contingency, I truly feel like we're part of your team. And if we win for you, we're not only making sure that you keep a foot in this race, but then we're participating in your success. And for me, there's nothing better than making sure that we can mediate issues with debtors. Not all debtors are bad. Sometimes debtors have issues. They can't pay their bills. And the ones that are respectful and cooperate with us, we're just as respectful and cooperative to them. And we're basically, mediating and working out issues that takes a lot of time in order for them to reach an agreement, payment plan, settlement offers for both parties to move on and keep this industry rolling. When people are stuck on like, if they should pay their bill, they don't feel like they should pay this much. They don't feel like the product was good enough, so they don't want to pay, but someone's not able to communicate there. It just, people get glued, they get stuck, and it just stops and halts all movement. So I like the idea of moving things forward, working out problems, and really helping the good actors in this space, continue to grow and like I said, have a leg in the race.
Have you made cannabis debt collection hip, cool, and sexy?
I'd have to ask someone else, right? I don't know if I can stand by that, but I will say that I think we've been able to create a narrative of debt collection that is different than the standard of what a debt collection agency does or is. I think because of our industry expertise, we can speak the lingo. We understand the different players in this industry. We're not going to be like the typical corporate or traditional guys or women or whoever out there that are going to go out and say, yeah, cannabis, it's a big opportunity. Like, we want to get inside cannabis, and oh, yeah, we feel like there's some states that are going to go legal soon. No, like you really need to understand how the intricacies of this business work in order to mediate some of these very technical situations. And I think because of that, call us hip, cool, or whatever, but I think we're relevant. I think we're relevant to this industry, and I think that's what leads to our success versus anyone else that tries to do what we do.
Does the cannabis industry have a problem paying its debts?
1,000%. Yes. 1,000%. And it's been a problem that, I thought could happen. I didn't think it would happen this bad nationwide. It was happening to us in Colorado. And shortly thereafter, California, has become the worst. And other, now eastern states, Michigan, Massachusetts, are following suit. And there's a multitude of different reasons of why this is happening. I can try to sum it up, like, where number one, banking is a problem. So companies are forced to essentially act like banks and extend credit, because the movement of money in cannabis, as we all know, is not as free as other industries. To get a loan, to get funding, there's some great funding partners in cannabis that I advise people to go out and find if they're looking for capital. It's just not as easy as it would be if you had a banking relationship and said, hey, can I get a small business loan, or can I get some operating cash for XYZ? It's not as accessible. So that's one reason that a lot more cannabis companies are extending their own trade credit between each other. And then the other part of this is just because of the youth of the industry, and some, we're maturing fast, but because of the immaturity a couple years ago, where, for example, we didn't have a full-blown AR team, credit collection team. We didn't have the resources or even the understanding at that time in Colorado that we needed to have all these checks and balances around credit collections to have our sales rep offer 15 days for a client to pay us back. Well, that's very standard in most businesses, in traditional businesses. And in cannabis, it's becoming more normal, but that sophistication hasn't been there, which is why there's been a lot of issues around proper default language, even having signatures on transaction agreements to sell product on credit. And the final thing that I think is most exciting for me now is in form of opportunity, but it really sucks for the industry, is that there hasn't been proper data and there hasn't been proper credit scoring or credit reporting in the industry. If you go to Dun & Bradstreet, if you go to Equifax, TransUnion, and you pull a credit score like any other company would do in any other industry, if they were going to extend credit, it's going to shoot most of the time blanks, like because nobody's actively reporting their accounts receivable data to these bureaus. So last year, we started a sister company called the Cannabis Credit Association to tackle this problem head on. The Cannabis Credit Association is essentially the first cannabis trade credit association and group nationwide, where companies from ancillary to state-specific plant touching are reporting their AR data to us on a monthly basis. They get access to all aggregated anonymous, solely anonymous data of payers that are either on time, 30, 60, 90, or late. And because of our partnership with Cannabiz Collects, there's now access to over $100 million of debt that's been submitted to a third-party collection agency in every state. So you can make sure that you're doing a proper credit check before you go out and extend terms, where you at least have something to look at and monitor before you just freely extend terms. And this is just the beginning, where our whole goal is to build the most robust credit reporting, scoring, monitoring for cannabis in order for companies to do better business. And we're super excited about that, because as much as I love collecting money for our clients, I would love to help prevent as many issues in the future if I can, by giving tools, data, and a community to help prevent the problems before they start.
So how do cannabis operators join the Cannabis Credit Association?
Yeah, it's pretty easy, and it's a good time because we're still offering what we call our founding membership spots to get people on board, get enough data to make it useful for everyone. You just go to cannabizcredit.com, CANNABIZ credit.com. You can basically sign up or apply for a quick demo to see the platform, kind of get a feel for the data that we're accumulating, and trust that we've got our ducks in a row when it comes to the platform itself. And for just $125 a month right now, it's all we're charging for this. We basically can get you on board within about 5 minutes. And our only requirement as being a member is you have to share your accounts receivable data. And like I said, it's solely anonymous. So the more members that sign on to this, the better the data set's going to be for everybody. And to be honest, I was almost forced into launching this because there needed to be someone to quarterback this initiative. And because of our client base and because of our credibility on the collection side, and all of our clients saying, hey, Brett, I really hope that we could have some kind of solution so we don't get burned. As much as I wanted to say, well, just report your data to Dun & Bradstreet, just report your data to these bureaus. No, it's very challenging to get people to actually participate unless they get value in return. And what we were able to do, because of the 7 years and 100 million plus of data that we've had from the collection agency, we were able to say, okay, I got it. You're not ready to share because you don't see an ROI immediately. We're going to give you a massive return on investment immediately because of our huge data set from the collection business, which is like the most collection data in the industry, where you can see risk profiles more or less on this collection data. And in exchange, now we're going to ask you to share your data. And I think because we waited, we had enough data to participate on both sides. Now the dominoes are falling where people feel like we're all in this together to get this moving. But I honestly couldn't wait any longer for people to start reporting data, because you really have to push them. It's new for our industry. And we can't wait on the states and the governments to come in and enforce new policy and rules either. We need a solution now, and we need to have kind of the same tech stacks and tools that other industries do to make better decisions. So that's kind of how this whole thing got rolling.
Well, and I understand, because it seems like operators are wearing many different hats, and don't always have the same internal resources that other traditional businesses do. Are cannabis companies getting better when it comes to debt and debt collection and in-house AR teams?
Absolutely. I think it's kind of like, when you trip, you'll, maybe learn how to walk a little bit better. And this has been happening a lot in cannabis, especially as each new state becomes more mature. What typically I see happening is, a new state will come online, everything's going pretty well in the beginning, and then it gets competitive, and then it starts falling around credit extension. And basically, if one company starts doing it, then the competitors start doing it, and then it just is a whole ball of people extending credit. And now the retailers are expecting credit terms because everyone's doing it, and they won't work with you if you don't extend credit. And I think what's happened now is enough vendors and producers, creditors, have been burned at least once or twice. And we have like over 1,000 clients, right? It doesn't mean we're actively working with 1,000 clients. It means we've had over 1,000 clients that have submitted at least one claim in the last 7 years, where there's a ton of companies, more and more every day, that have been burned. And once you're burned once, you realize, okay, we can't do this again. We have to fix what went wrong. And typically what went wrong is not having enough oversight, management, controls, processes around credit extension. So we're seeing, number one, a lot more cannabis companies and our clients investing in their accounts receivable teams. Before, I used to be in touch with the owners and the CEOs of these companies that were doing the collections themselves, almost like I was doing in 2015. Now there's dedicated reps. We're starting to see a little bit more of actual credit managers that are doing their best to get, do some underwriting before they submit accounts to collections, and then also having collection managers that are responsible for collecting the money internally if it goes past due. What's super important in cannabis today is making sure that you collect on your current receivables as fast as possible. Because if you wait or you delay, those debtors are going to pay your competitors or pay their other vendors before you. And then once it hits 90 days or longer, the chance of you collecting goes down substantially. And then if you start focusing all your time on the late money and you only have a limited team, you're missing all the time to focus on that current paper, which are the paper that's going to be way more easier to collect and the low-hanging fruit. And that's the reason that we exist, is because when it goes past 90 days, you really shouldn't be chasing the old money if you've got a stack of receivables that you need to collect that are within 90 days. And that's where we kind of give a helping hand on a contingency only basis to help on that older paper. But long story short, I definitely see the industry maturing on credit and collection practices. And I see that there's more solutions, just like the Cannabis Credit Association, that are coming out now to give these companies some resource and some, tool set to make better decisions as they mature.
So as part of the ROI with the association, can you essentially look up a potential partner and see if they have any red flags?
Exactly. Yeah. You can look up a company and you can see if they've been on, a debtor database or the member accounts receivable database. The member AR database is full of, current accounts, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, right? So it doesn't mean that if you're on the list, you're a bad actor. It basically means that you have some visibility with other members to share information together freely, so you can make your own decisions. If somebody asks you, they want 10 pounds of weed and they want it on 30-day terms, instead of your sales rep just getting excited saying we have to take it, that's a huge order, you can do a quick check to say, what's our risk here? What are we risking? Have there been any other competitors or companies out there that have extended terms to this company and they're late? Because if they are late, the sale means nothing if you don't get paid on it. You know what I mean? So if you're getting, a $50,000 order, yeah, it looks great on revenue, but if you're not getting the cash in the door, it's dead money. And I think it's really important for people to understand that and to be careful. And I know it's hard. I've been there, like, you're trying to impress investors. You want to increase your sales. You have customers that are promising you the world. They say that they're going to be buying XYZ. And then you have to ask them to sign paperwork, personal guarantee language, default language. No one wants to do that. So you just have to have policies in place to say, okay, when are you going to, mandate signatures? And I recommend it for any time you extend credit, but I know that there's special cases, but at least do some kind of credit check or, reference check to make sure that you're not blindly giving out free money.
Yeah. It sounds like too many people just trusting their gut still.
Way too many people trusting their gut. Exactly.
So what was it like pulling your dad out of retirement? And was he a little reticent since it was the cannabis industry?
Yeah, well said. I think it was pretty funny actually, because he calls me the day when I was making those collection calls and I was getting frustrated, and he calls me that night and we were talking and he's like, Brett, I'm so bored. Like, I don't know what to do with myself anymore. I'm playing golf every day. And I was like, Dad, it sounds like a first world problem, man. Like, you built a great agency, you sold it, like you hit retirement. I don't know what you're looking for, but I could really hear it in his voice that he was like really upset. And I think it happens to a lot of founders that, exit their companies, or, retired people that leave their jobs. And then they realize, what am I going to do for the next 30, 40 years? So that's when the light bulb really hit me, because earlier that day I was like, oh my God, I'm so sick of, making these collection calls. And now my dad wants to do something with his life and he doesn't know what. And the first thing I said when I called him, I think a couple of days later, when I really thought I wanted to get this thing off the ground, he was like, what do you mean collections in cannabis? Like, it's an all cash business. What are you talking about? Like, it makes no sense. Like, you just tell me, Brett, that you're driving around a bunch of money in your car. Like, what do you mean it's credit? So I had to explain to him that just because it was an all cash business, it doesn't mean that cash was being given to you on the spot on delivery, which is credit terms. If you're basically delivering a product with the promise to get paid later. And after a couple conversations, I had to explain it to him, and yeah, he definitely was more on the traditional type, working like, more corporate paper. And after conversations and him knowing I was out in Colorado and understanding, my experience and what I was doing out there, he ended up getting really excited about it. And, now he's known as, the cannabis collector, guy. He's really known as the one collecting the money in this industry. And, we've really fallen in love with it, because I think for him, just like I said earlier, he really feels good about what he's doing. He's working for a lot more smaller companies. A lot of people that really need the cash versus some of these big corporate clients he used to represent in the past. And he's making a direct impact. Yeah, it's been a fun ride working with him, honestly, so far. It's been fun.
And he's still involved with the business?
He is. Yeah, he is.
So did you have any issues in terms of what I have to imagine? He brought more of an old school approach to debt collection, and you had your ideas as to how you were going to change it up. Did you guys clash at all in terms of, the company's philosophy?
I think in most partnerships there's clashes in ideas and philosophy. So it's a good question, especially when it's a family member. There's a personal component where you kind of really know each other at the same time, so you have to figure out how to kind of work together there. But to be honest with you, it's been honestly very easy so far getting to where we are today. He built an incredible business in the past, so it was a trust factor there of he knows what he's doing when it comes to collections. I think sometimes it's hard for people, some clients, some debtors, just to understand the personality of someone that's on the phone all day collecting money, being told really bad words every day and being told to, get out of here. And I'm not going to cuss on this podcast, but there's a lot of, foul language, used at debt collectors. And that leads to a lot of stress. That leads to, an unpleasant work environment. And that also leads to someone that has, a personality that you need to have in your corner if you're going to go after someone that owes you money and that's refusing to pay you. So the only times that I think we clash is I'm way more of the easygoing, positive, let's go. And he's way more direct, more of the attorney figure in the relationship, and the way that we handle communication externally, internally. That's been the only thing, which is it's common for really anyone that's been practicing, debt collection for 35 years. I think anyone would understand that.
So one of my first jobs out of college, I managed a cash store, and a big part of that is debt collection. And I mean, you're right. You hear vile things as you're calling people trying to collect. And, do you have one that stands out that you'll always remember? Because for me I remembered I called this guy and it was like you're calling him all the time. It was before they kind of changed the rules as to how many times you could contact him. And he just goes, "Nah, David, money's funny right now, and it's not gonna be not gonna be any better." And I just remember him saying, like, the money's funny, don't call again. And it like burned in there. Like, do you have one in particular where you heard the reason or the excuse and it stands out?
Honestly, because I don't do the collections myself every day, it's harder for me to pull a story.
Okay.
I'm sure if you ask anyone on my collection team, they could give you countless. I think for me, the funniest thing that stands out is when, when I go to these trade shows and I have debtors come up to us and actually be like, "Oh my God, your Cannabiz Collects? Like you've been calling me for months." And then the surprising thing is I'm like, "Oh my God, like here we go." I'm about not to hear the end of it. But then many times, and this isn't like a self-promoting advertisement here, but many times they're like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for helping me clear up the debt that I owed you, to owe your client. Like I was just overwhelmed. I had too much to do. And thank God that you guys stepped in because I just didn't have time to like kind of manage all the money we owed people." And I'm like, wow, like that's also a big kind of light into what's happening as well. And the sympathy that we really have a lot with the debtors is like they also are running young companies with limited staff, maybe poor management on the financial side. And sometimes they get into problems and they don't have an accounts payable person or somebody on their team to like really help clean up the mess on the payable side. And when someone like a debt collector like us comes in and we try to figure it out and make sure that they answer their calls and make sure they pay their debt, surprisingly enough, sometimes when I go to these trade shows, these people are really happy. So it's that stands out for me a lot sometimes.
Well, I mean, I guess that says a lot about how you guys conduct yourselves in the business world. How do you collect? What is your methodology? What works?
Yeah, it's one we get all the time. It's like, what do you guys do that we're not doing? And I think I'm going to start with like the psychology of debt collection should not be minimized. The idea that you're actually going to contract an agency because you don't have the time for it anymore, and this agency is a professional agency, especially one that's cannabis specific, is enough many times where the debtors say, "Okay, we're not going to yank these guys' chains anymore. Like, this is serious. We need to get this paid." So number one, the idea of just escalating to a collection partner or a lawyer from your internal team, maybe there's nothing else you can do. Like I was there. I did everything I could, the same emails, demand letters, but when it's escalated, the psychology of that to a debtor many times makes a difference. Now, aside from repetitive emails, phone calls, text messages, specific demand letters, language that we know how to use because of the industry experience that we have, but more or less, this stuff is pretty standard when it comes to collections. You're just being persistent. You're motivated. Everyone in our team only works debt in cannabis. It's only cannabis related. So, other agencies, they might have all kinds of different industries. Our collectors are specifically trained in this industry and in this context. And with the data that we have, I think one of the biggest things that we offer to our clients is just like if you join the CCA, you could have access to some of this data as well. When we get a claim from one of our clients, let's say it's in California against a specific debtor, we could tell you 8 times out of 10 within about 10 minutes of receiving your claim what the chance of collectability is, because more or less we've dealt with this same debtor like 5, 10, 15, 20 times. Sometimes we've got 40 plus claims against the same debtor again with different clients. It's 40 different clients submitting against the same person. So, when it comes to working with a collection agency, maybe we can't do anything different than you've done, but what we can do for you on a contingency only basis, if you submit a claim to our agency, we could tell you very quickly, guys, we need to escalate this to litigation. And one of the services we offer is we can actually litigate claims for our clients at a complete contingency basis with associate counsel across the country. So we manage the entire legal network for you, and you just pay a contingency fee upon success. And you don't have to find lawyers, pay lawyers, any of that. So with that said, what that does is kind of time value of money. We're able to tell you so quickly, hey, here's our recommendation. We think it makes sense to escalate this to legal, or we don't want to waste your time. We're going to close out the file. And we're really there to help essentially clean up the books for our clients, knowing that they might not have, and they typically don't have the information we have because this is all we do. We just work with people that are owed money in this industry.
So one thing I've heard when it comes to debt collection is that after you submit it to a collection agency, that like you're kind of getting pennies on the dollar back. Is that accurate? Or I mean, it could just be a complete misconception.
Well, it depends. For us, we only charge 25% for any monies we collect. So you're at 75% of any monies that we're able to collect for you if we're successful. If we're not successful, you don't pay a dime. So it's much more than pennies. And it saves you a lot of time. Same thing with legal. Our legal rates, are definitely way less than pennies on the dollar if we escalate to legal at 40% contingency fee. So big picture here, I think maybe there's a misconception around debt collection and also factoring and buying the debt, where people ask us, do you guys factor or purchase the invoices from us to collect? Which in that case, right now, if I was going to agree to that, we don't do that. We do not buy the debt because it's absolutely too risky. And I wouldn't advise anyone to do it until there's better data, which is actually what we're working on. But if we were going to buy the debt, it would probably be pennies on the dollar, because you never know what's going to happen, the collectability of these accounts. And, no one would want to take that risk without, a big reward if the collection was successful.
Oh, gotcha. So I'm not familiar with it. So what do you mean by buy the debt? So like you buy the liability, and then you can probably buy it at like a low cost, and then what you get is what you get, and it's not kind of on you.
Exactly. Let's say you have a $10,000 invoice. At the standard way that we would work is, okay, David, submit the $10,000 invoice. Whatever we collect, we'll charge you 25%. If we can't collect, you don't pay. That's standard. Now, if we were a factoring company, if we purchased the debt, we would say, okay, David, we're going to buy that $10,000 invoice for you at 30%, at $3,000, now 70% discount. We'll buy that debt for you. This gives you the cash in your pocket immediately because you need it, right? And you don't know if you're ever going to get that money in the future. And then we'll go and try to collect it. And right, if we can collect it, the 10,000, then we made a $7,000 spread. We don't do that. Those are just hypothetical numbers. But that's how typically it works. And I have heard that there are some companies and finance companies that are maybe starting to dip their toes into factoring. But even factoring companies are going to need collection agencies or have their own collection department to go after and collect the paper, where it's all about if you can collect or not. And that's the tough call today in cannabis.
Well, returning 75%, I understand how that can make a huge impact, especially for those mom and pop shops. Do you have like what's your batting average? Like how often are you able to kind of collect?
Yeah. And this goes back to like how soon our clients are submitting accounts to collections. And that's like our big kind of like takeaway. We're trying to push this really hard to the cannabis industry, is like 90 days. If you're not hearing, word from the debtor, if they're not cooperating, you got to get this escalated to collections. If they're ghosting you, it means they probably are juggling a bunch of other vendors to pay. Right now, as you guys have probably all seen, cannabis companies are going out of business at alarming rates. Like, you don't want to wait to be the nice guy. The nice guy finishes last in this industry. So if we're getting paper that's, debt between 90 and 120 days old, more or less like the standard time frame of escalation, we're batting 50 to 70% on average, right? But cannabis isn't there yet. Most cannabis companies are waiting 6 months to a year, sometimes a year and a half, 2 years to submit collections. And when people ask what's our average, well, if the majority of accounts coming in are a year old, many of them are out of business, we're more at like what a standard, if you look up like standard collectability for collection agencies, it's close to about 20%, 23%. And we're batting right around 20%, with those older dollars, those older paper, where, obviously that hurts our chances of collection, but and more importantly, it hurts our clients, because if they're only going to get their money collected 20% of the time because they're waiting, the lesson here is you need to submit your accounts to collections sooner. And that doesn't mean that, you're going to basically be giving a free ticket to a collection agency and basically a free handout. That's not what we want. We don't want to be taking money out of your pocket. We want to make sure that cannabis companies free up their time, their resources to focus on current receivables when accounts that have gone silent and past due have stopped responding. Don't waste your time hoping for a prayer. You need somebody to save your time and to work that file for you consistently and recommend litigation sooner than the chance of maybe in 6 months to a year, they'll pay me, which right now the story is in 6 months to a year, these debtors that owe a lot of people money, they're out of business. You know, they're full of tax liens. They're swamped in secured debt from private investors. Like, even if you get a judgment, the chance of you actually getting that paid to you, you're a second place, right? You're behind, you're an unsecured lender. The secured lenders are the ones that have the real estate, the loans, the, you know, capital partners. And that's what I think. I just want to shake the industry sometimes and say, that's what you need to realize. You're not that important as a vendor. You know, unless you have contracts or a personal guarantee, you can't wait. You got to get in line.
Do you have any tips as to how to avoid unpaid invoices? I mean, I think it's a great tip that, you know, once you reach the 90-day mark, like, you got to hand it off and you got to do it quickly. Do you have any other tips that you could share, or, you know, steps that people should take when it happens?
Absolutely. I think number one, do not have your sales team work as your accounts receivable department. You need to have at least a contractor, or if you have the resources to have a full-time collection manager, you need to have somebody dedicated to collecting money if you are extending credit, period. Your sales rep should be focusing on new money, and your collection team or accounts receivable team should be focused solely on collecting old money. I see way too often our clients have their sales reps making collection calls, and it's so productive, and you're missing opportunity to bring in good clients while you might not able to collect the older paper. That's one. Two, you need to have paperwork, period. Like, when you do a deal and you sign up a new client, if you're gonna extend credit, you have to have some sort of a credit agreement in place. You know, at least if you're not going to take the time to do a credit check, and you're not going to take the time to put together, really robust language, you know, at least have something that has their signature on there, that that your expectations are set clearly, and that there's interest language that you can charge interest, and you can also have default language where you can charge cost of collection and cost of legal if they default. These are very simple clauses that you should have in your agreements if you're extending any sort of credit. And, you know, other than making sure that you've got a process in place where, you know, at 15 days at past due, here's what's going to happen. At 30 days past due, here's the email that's going to go out. At 45 days past due, the CFO is going to, you know, escalate to the CFO. Like, have an escalation process in place. My final thing that I really recommend is, you know, finding a platform, tools, or solutions like the Cannabis Credit Association to use in order to make credit decisions. If not, don't do credit. You know, just try to stay COD. You know, if you're not doing the proper underwriting, and you're not doing your best to act as a bank, like a bank would do, you're not going to go that far. I know it's unreasonable to ask for that, but at least try to find some tools, reference points, communities to check before you give out your money to somebody else without collateral and without any kind of recourse if they don't pay. That's the most important thing for me.
Is part of the problem that, given sort of the state to state fractured nature of the industry, people are often beholden to these bad actors because there's just nobody else to work with?
Yeah, that's been a huge problem, 100%. I think there's some big retail chains that there's specific names out there that I think a lot of people have been talking about lately, that have almost used this as like almost a Ponzi scheme to basically use vendor financing, where you'll get credit from your vendors. You'll use, the product to sell, use that cash to grow your business, and then either not pay your bills or do mass settlements and basically offer all of your vendors like 50% on the dollar just to get them some money, which it's very shady business. But unfortunately, like you said, it beholds these vendors to kind of, bend to the knee to these dispensaries when they've got tons and tons and tons of vendors after them for money. So it's actually pretty easy now for some of these dispensaries to say, oh, we're going to go out of business. We can't pay all of our bills, so we'll offer everybody, 50% settlement in order to clear up this balance and continue doing business together. And yeah, I don't like that. I get frustrated by that. It's not fair. Sometimes, like I said, these retailers get into issues and they need to climb their way out, and that's fine. But I know for sure there's operators and dispensaries out there that have been using this as a tactic to save money and grow their business by taking advantage of their vendors. And that's really the entire initiative of what we're trying to do to shed light on, good and bad actors in cannabis.
You'd recently announced a partnership with Cannabiz. What is the nature of that collaboration? What could you tell us about it?
Yeah, so we've been in touch with Cannabiz for a while. We highly respect what they've been doing in California, and they're also expanding into other states as we speak. And they've been one of the first distributors that I've seen that have really taken a hard stance on collections for their partners. They really try to step in and make sure when their brands are doing deals with dispensaries, and they're obviously middlemaning as the distributor, that they're helping to their best of their ability for their brand partners to collect their money. Cannabiz even has their own accounts receivable, team that works on behalf of their brand partner to collect money. And where we step in is if Cannabiz is not able to collect, and they've done a phenomenal job themselves already, collecting a majority of the money owed to their brand partners, we're there as a backup contingency plan for their brand partners, for Cannabiz to then submit those accounts to our agency upon their brand's approval. So then we can go collect money for their brand partners, which really gives anyone that works with Cannabiz the maximum amount of opportunity to collect their money, probably before maybe anyone else out there, because of the resources shared between Cannabiz and our team now to collect money for brands out in California.
One thing you had mentioned is the litigation side of things. How do you sue cannabis companies? And is there a belief out there that you can't, given the sort of quasi-legal regulatory environment?
Yeah, that's been a kind of a myth or a gray area, I would say, for a lot of operators and just industry professionals, not knowing, what's right and what's legal and what's not legal. But to be very clear, if you're operating in a state and someone owes you money, you're under a legal cannabis state. You can absolutely sue a cannabis company for not paying their bills, 100%. Same way you'd sue anyone else. You can get a judgment. You can go after the judgment. That's a conversation for another day of how that works, but it's a long process. And there's even opportunities where once you get a judgment, a sheriff can go to the dispensary and basically, take out the cash from a register in some states. So there's ways that you can garnish bank accounts and all these things in the legal process once a judgment has been acquired and awarded by a state. Now, the one difference, and I think that's the confusion, is cannabis companies cannot file for bankruptcy because bankruptcy is a federal division. And as we know, cannabis is not legal federally. So the difference is when someone says they're going bankrupt or a cannabis company is going bankrupt, send me that email or show me how, because it's not really allowed. It's not part of the federal government to allow cannabis companies to go into bankruptcy. But what they have in place of bankruptcy is what they call state receivership. There's been a lot of articles lately about companies going into receivership. It's basically the state's way of conducting bankruptcy. So if you are a company and you have a ton of debt and you're basically, you're going out of business and you can't make it, you would essentially appoint a state receiver and go into receivership, and the state will appoint a receiver to take precedent in your business that has a bunch of debt and help you liquidate those assets and pay off the creditors that are owed money. And as I mentioned earlier, most of the time there's not going to be that many assets left over. They're going to be paying the secured creditors, the big capital, secured lenders, real estate, things like that. And the unsecured lenders, the brands, the ones that just have invoice for product, typically get pennies on the dollar once an account goes into state receivership.
I'm going to guess just because you've mentioned dispensaries multiple times, or I'm going to guess it is dispensaries, but what side of the business has the biggest problem paying their bills?
Yeah, dispensaries, and especially retailers in California. But what happens is it's a domino effect and it happened to me in Colorado because we were owed so much money from dispensaries. We had about $500,000 owed to our company at some point. I mean, it put a lot of stress on us to pay our bills, which meant bills to grow supply, machinery, marketing agencies, staffing, all the different vendors that we used to then produce the product to sell through dispensaries. It ended up having an issue on our accounts payable to pay our vendors. And that's what is the name of the game now here in cannabis is the dispensaries are owing a lot of the producers money for a multitude of different reasons. I think there's a ton of good acting dispensaries, but there's a ton of tax issues. There's banking issues. There's so many issues in cannabis that we need to fix. But what's happening is it's causing financial pressure for for dispensaries to pay their bills to vendors. And then because of that, these vendors, these producers, cultivators have issues paying their bills to all these other ancillary providers and even publications. Let's say someone wants to, market or do some advertising with you guys, and then they don't get paid by all their dispensaries or from their customers. Now you guys might be owed money. And it's unfortunately been a viral subject in cannabis lately. And I as much as it's been fueling the growth of our business, which, I'm not going to lie, that's obviously been great personally for the industry and for our business, because the quality of the claims continue to go down as there's less money circulating. We want the quality of cannabis business to improve. And with that, we need everybody to work together to kind of understand what credit and collections even means as a starting point.
Well, I guess we know who to call. Do you only work with licensed operators in licensed states, or do you work with, like Delta 8 shops or people in the CBD market?
We've done some work in CBD. We found that the CBD or smoke shop arena doesn't have the same sort of problems as cannabis THC. I think it's because maybe there are more mature markets that have been around a lot longer. I mean, a lot of these retailers are like the smoke shops or convenience stores. And from my conversations with them, they're like, no, like we never do, we never get credit extended to us, or the vendors that are selling product to those smoke shops say we would never extend credit to one of these retailers. That's been my personal experience and what I've heard. And I think because of that, the biggest issue is just the youth of the cannabis stores and the cannabis companies maybe not having that trauma or not having those issues to kind of improve. I want to be clear, I don't think that by going COD only is the solution. I think this world is run on debt. I don't think debt is a bad thing. I think leverage is extremely powerful and very important for business, as we all know, and for countries. But I think to extend debt and to extend credit, there has to be more of a focus on how to do it properly and how to do it the right way versus blindly telling someone they can pay you in 30 days. I think that needs to end.
As an entrepreneur, do you have your eye on your next big project?
Right now, I'm all in on kind of focusing and doubling down on the collection and credit space here in cannabis. And really, the next big thing for us is the credit reporting and credit scoring through the Cannabis Credit Association. It's a brand new platform. We just launched it later last year, and we're signing up members every day across different states. And for me, it's just getting as many members as we can on board, because the power of that community, I really believe, is going to change this industry for the better. I really do. And I think without it, if let's say we decide to shut our doors tomorrow, I think it's going to be a massive issue until somebody solves this. And I am extremely engaged and optimistic about what we can do to kind of move this industry forward by use of this association.
No, I'm honestly, I was glad that you shared that. I'm really excited about the work with the association because, as you said, there is a demand for it, or definitely need for it in the industry. Brett, thank you very much for taking so much time with us today. I really do appreciate it. And it's a part of the business that we haven't covered as much as well. Before we get out of here, is there anything else that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or Cannabiz Collects?
I mean, I would say feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, at Brett-Gelfand. I've been loving LinkedIn lately. It's been a great platform, especially in this industry. I would love to connect with you. I'm extremely open to helping with questions, concerns, updates. If there's a specific situation you're going through, we're a very consultative agency, and we don't bill for our time at all. So, connect with me, and let's get you signed up for the association as well, because I think the power of numbers is going to really play a big part in this.
Well, Brett, thanks again for taking the time, man. I do appreciate it.
No, thank you, David. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. All right, for Brett Gelfand, managing partner with Cannabiz Collects, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we'll see you next week.